Ladies and gentlemen, the first course which you are going to have inside of the Animation Masterclass for Premiere Pro is going to be revolving around placement theory. And placement theory is just a bunch of different things that I want to teach you guys so that you guys can develop the skill of putting things together in a scene and making it look really, really good. And initially, over the last year of running Ultimat Editors, I learned this. Initially, I thought that most editors would know what a good scene looks like and how to replicate it. And this is just because the way that you understand as editors, understand what good things look like, what a good edit looks like, is by consuming content online. And the more content you consume, most of you guys are subscribed to, other editing channels. And the more you consume of that content, the more you see what good scenes look like. The way you understand what a good scene looks like is if you just compare it to what those edits look like. And I'm talking about, like, if you watch, for example, a Tom's Project video, or if you watched a video of Iman Gaji and you saw an edit there and you were like super inspired by it, that would set up the standard for you for what looks like a good edit. So naturally, I just thought that a lot of editors would already have that, but it seems like we should go through a few functions in order to teach you guys what a good scene setup looks like. And that's why the first thing we're going to dive into is the placement theory. So what even is placement theory? Placement theory is just a set of kind of rules that we follow when it comes to editing that just makes scenes look better. There's a way to place things and size them in a scene that looks very cheap, and there's a way to place them and size them that looks very luxurious and high quality. And so the first question that we have today is, what even is placement theory? Well, placement theory, what you're about to learn, is just a bunch of these rules that you guys can follow when editing videos, and you guys can keep in the back of your head. And these are going to help you place things that look, place things in a way that looks much better and set up scenes that look way higher quality. So first thing I want to talk to you guys about is the rule of thirds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my wrench tool. You don't have to do this. I just want you guys to follow through with me so you can understand it. And I'm going to add a few guides here just so that we can just show you guys this quick example. Okay, so I'm going to make my scene a bit bigger, and I'm going to add a few guides here. So we've already got 2 guides. So let's just go ahead and, oops, why do I have that? Let's go ahead and just realign these so that they are correct, like so. And let's go ahead and realign these so that they are correct, like so. Okay, so what I have in front of me is the 3x3 grid. And the 3x3 grid is a very common grid. This is a grid that consists of 3 squares which are all equal. And the way that this is useful is it shows us a top line over here, which is this line here, and it shows us a bottom line here, and it shows us 2 horizontal lines. The way that we're going to be using this is we're going to be splitting it into different zones. So this is your upper third over here. It's these 3 squares up here. So I quickly just want to show you guys. So my object right now is in the upper thirds. It is these top 3 squares right now. The lower thirds are these bottom squares over here in the bottom. That's what lower thirds look like. And this is your middle, right? So this is your, I think they call them middle thirds or whatever it's called, right? So this is your middle of your screen. And all of these serve different purposes, but I just want to quickly show you guys the naming. And let's go ahead and just get started with this. The first thing you guys need to understand is that the way that the 3x3 grid is helpful for us is it allows us to put things and use it as a kind of a metric or a measure to put things on the screen and make them look very appealing. And that's basically the best way to put it together. The thing about this is that when a viewer looks at a scene, their eyes automatically go to these 2 points here. It's this point up here and this point over here. I'm going to quickly draw these out so you guys can understand. They automatically go to these 2 points over here. That's why whenever we have speakers on the screen, we always keep their head around the center of the screen and in the top line. If you guys check it back over here, like when I'm editing and here I've got a zoom in, the reason the zoom in works so good is because my eyes are close to this line over here. Obviously it's not perfect, but my eyes are close to this line over here. So you notice how using this line helps us get the viewer's focus. So the first thing you just need to keep in mind is that the viewer is always going to be focused on these 2 lines, on these 2 dots over here. So whatever you want your viewer to focus the most on, put it always in the center right here. The center of the screen is where all the focus is, okay? So if you have a face, align the eyes with these 2 dots or this line up here. If you have an object that you want the viewer to instantly focus on, put it in the center. The viewer will instantly see it. Everything outside of this, so everything over here, over here, over here, over here, over here, over here, and over here, and over here, all of these are not important. These are the side views. So everything in your side view are things that fill up the background that the viewer doesn't necessarily focus on, but only focuses on the center. That's kind of how you want to imagine it. You want to imagine that the center is always a priority. The center is that piece that the viewer is always seeing, and then the sides are just there to fill it in. So whenever you have something in your animation and it's so important you need your viewer to focus on it, you put it right here in the center and your viewer will instantly see it. That being said, if you ever want to fill up your background in your animation and you don't want to make the animation feel empty, you always fill it in over here on these edges like so. The further you go away from the center like this, the less your viewer is going to be focused on it, and the less he's going to be distracted by it. So with this being said, how do we use this with animations? Well, number one, if we ever have any important things in animations and we want to get our viewer to focus on it, we always put them in the center like so. And you're not going to need these rule of thirds, but I'm just kind of giving them for you. You're not going to need to replicate these rule of thirds using the ruler like this, but you're just going to need to keep this in mind while you're animating. So first point is, if you ever want your viewer to focus on something specific, you can always place it over here in the center. So if you're placing one object in your animation, put it in the center. It allows your viewer to focus. Now, with this being said, where do all these lines come in handy? Well, if you want to place multiple objects, it is very, very important to understand that the best way to make them look nice together is to literally place them according to these lines. If you want to put two objects, one up top and one at the bottom, the best thing you can do is align one with this line here and align one with this line here. This is going to make these two objects look very, very seamless. The second thing is, if you want to, for example, fill up your animation with two separate scenes, like you want to have a section that showcases an object and a section that showcases something else, you can split your screen into halves and you can place one object on these lines here. Notice how it crosses these 2 points here, and one object on these lines here. Look at how much better this looks instead of, for example, if I placed one object over here on the left and one object over here. So notice how these set up two separate scenes for us. If I had an object in the left side over here and an object over here, it just looks a lot better than having an object far apart. So what these lines help us do is it helps us place our objects in a way that makes them look better on the screen. So here's a few scenarios for you. If you were placing something that needs to be focused in the center, put your focus over here in the middle and then put the distractions on the side. If you have to place two objects, place one of the objects on these lines and one of the objects on these lines, whether it be text, whether it be an animation, whether it be an image, whatever it is, right? And if you guys want to place multiple objects, then you can feel free to use all these squares like so. And you guys can see when we use them, we stay away from the edges because the edges are more distracting and it's harder to see something if it's on the edge like this. So with this being said, that is pretty much everything you need to know about the rule of thirds. There's one more thing I need to give to you guys, which is sizing. And I'm just going to quickly talk about this. For sizing, I've seen a lot of editors, beginner editors, make this common mistake, and I want to make sure none of you guys make this. It is that early on, they like to make things very big. And even later on, like when you make things that in editing, when you make things big, it just looks lower quality. Like the YouTube text right now looks very low quality because it's huge. So big things when it comes to editing just don't look really good. So if you ever want to make a scene higher quality, make sure your size is smaller. And one good rule of thumb is, because you don't yet understand what good sizing is like, just whatever size you think is good, just go smaller than that, okay? That's a good rule of thumb. So if you place something and you're like, okay, this looks solid, just make it smaller. Okay, you don't want to make it too small to the point where it's not visible, but you definitely don't want it to be big to the point where it's like an asset. You want it to be something minimal, something subtle, something small. Okay, minimalism is it's the biggest takeaway you can take from these courses right now. So with this being said, once you keep sizing and placement in mind, if you place things according to the placement theories that I just told you, which is using your corners and using your two lines like so, using your upper third, lower third, and your middle for whatever focus you want. If you have a subject and text that you want to place, you would place the subject in the middle because it's the biggest focus, and text in your lower third over here. If you have a subject and an object that you want to show, then you place the subject on the right side and the object on the left side on these two lines over here, or you place the subject on the left and object on the right side like this, and this all comes down to placement theory. Okay, so I just wanted to introduce you guys to these concepts, and we're going to go ahead and apply them to these three kind of scenes that I've set up here so that we can see what good placement theory looks like. So here is our 3x3 grid, or our replicate of it. You can have a proper 3x3 grid, but we're just going to use this for now. So over here, my first scene that I've got is I've got a YouTube logo and some YouTube text, and I've got two objects here. There are a few ways I can do this. I can either have the YouTube logo, right? I can either have the text just kind of, let's move the text out of the way. I can either have the YouTube logo just take up the center of the screen like this and just kind of make it pretty big so everyone focuses on it. And then I would make my text smaller, right? Smaller like this, and I could have the text up top like so. Or I could have this thing smaller a bit and then place it on the bottom line, and then the YouTube text up here, and then I would resize them accordingly. So make maybe YouTube big, and then make this YouTube PNG slightly a bit bigger like this. Or I could go with probably the best option, which is place the YouTube PNG in the middle and the YouTube text right on top of it. And which means that both of these are going to be in the center of our scene, which means they are both going to look really good. However, I would make my text a lot smaller because right now the text is humongous and it does not look high quality. And for the YouTube PNG, I would also make that slightly smaller like so, and just kind of bring them together like this. Okay, so with this being said, if we place it in the middle of the screen, in the middle of the 3x3 grid, then all of our attention, all of our viewers' focus is going to be right on there, and whatever we place on the edges is not going to be important. Second scene is I've got two objects now. I have a big title, which I want to showcase, and I also have a big object. So we've got our big screenshot over here. I'm going to put this on the right side, on the right column, as I showed you guys before, and I'm just going to put my title on the left side, like this, and you guys can see already how good this looks. I can center align the title like so, and it's going to look even better. And this is just the best way to showcase a setup like this. Have a scene on the right side and the title on the left side. When I remove the rulers, you guys are going to watch through this and you're going to see how good this looks. But why does this work? It's because we've aligned our image to the center of these two lines over here, these 2 points, and we've aligned our title to these 2 points over here. We can actually bring our title a bit closer as well, because that's just going to look a lot better. Okay, and then our last one is we've got two logos, and there's a few ways we can show these. First of all, these are way too big, so let's make them like 50. A scale of 50 is good because right now they are humongous. Okay, and then I'm just gonna place one. If I have two objects, right, just take a guess. How do I showcase two objects on a scene? I can place one on the right side and place one on the left side, make sure they are both level, and have them both take up the left and right side of the screen. Or if I wanted to show them diagonally, I would have one in the top point over here and the razor in the bottom point like this. That just looks a lot better. Or even better, if I wanted to keep them big and showcase both of them, I would have one take up these two lines over here, and then one take up these two lines over here like so, and that's going to look the best. But with that being said, that is way too big, so I'm just going to go and tone them down to like 75. I think that's the best, kind of in between. Awesome. And with this being said, guys, as soon as I turn off my rulers, you guys are going to look through these scenes, and you're going to notice for some reason there's just nothing happening here. But for some reason, it just looks good. Like it looks like a well set up scene. Like this, for example, looks like a well set up animation scene just because of the sizing of the text and the sizing of the PNG. This, for example, looks like a well set up scene. Like it's just the placement of the title and the placement of the screenshot. This, for example, looks like a well set up scene just because of the placement of the icon and the placement of the second icon. So with this being said, that basically covers everything about placement theory. And I know you might be thinking, well, that's not really going to help me much. I promise you guys, once you understand these concepts and you keep this in the back of your head, whenever you're creating animations, you're instantly going to realize where you're supposed to be placing icons and where everything is supposed to be. And with this being said, guys, that is it for placement theory. I hope you kind of grasp the concept of using the rule of thirds and where sizing comes into play and how placement is important. But now it's time to dive into the second part of making a very good animation, which is the colors. And color theory is just as important. Having good colors in a scene is the most important thing. And in the next course, we're about to cover a few basic concepts about colors that you guys should know. So with this being said, let's get straight into our next course, and I'll see you guys there.